everyone, welcome back to this week's episode of Hand the Mic Over. As always, I'm your host Nevish, and today I'm here with a very special guest. She's an old friend of mine from elementary school who grew up in many different countries, with and without war. Today, she's agreed to share her compelling story on the role culture has played in her upbringing and identity. Without further ado, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today on the podcast. My name is Yusur Alazawi. I'm between 20 and 25, and I'm from Iraq. Iraq is located in the Middle East, which is in Asia.
What languages are spoken over there?
So the main language is Arabic, but there are also some regions, especially in the north, where they speak Kurdish.
Okay, can you speak your native language?
Yes. So with my first language is my mother tongue, I can speak, read, and write. But Kurdish, no, not at all. They never even taught it to me in school.
Oh wow, so you're a pro.
I struggle. I would say I read maybe at like a third grade level, but I could get it done.
I can't really read Urdu properly, so I'm very impressed right now. Would you be able to teach me something in Arabic?
Sure. To say hello, you could say marhaba.
Marhaba.
Yeah. And Iraqi is a very difficult, more like specific sort of dialect, more of a thicker accent. So when we say, how are you in Iraqi, you can ask shlonek.
Shlonek.
Yeah, and that's the male version. And then if it's a female, you can say shlonich.
Shlonich.
Got it. So marhaba shlonek or marhaba shlonich.
And when you said that Iraqi has a thicker dialect, what are you comparing it to?
The easiest one to compare it to is like the Levantine countries, which Iraq like borders a lot of them. Jordan, Palestinian, Syrian, Arabic, Lebanese all sound very similar, but we sound way different.
So are you able to understand Arabic from other countries, or is it hard?
I'm actually able to understand any type of Arabic, even North African, like Moroccan or Algerian type of Arabic, which they call it Darja. But the ongoing joke is that we can understand every other country, but they can't understand us when we speak.
That's so interesting. So do you know if there's some sort of historical significance behind that?
I'm not sure about a historical significance, but it's just the way they pronounce certain letters. They sort of swallow it, just like how we pronounce Toronto and not Toronto. Think of it how we would pronounce a word compared to how a British person would pronounce a word. And there's obviously different words that we use. I could give you maybe a history about one word that's different in Iraqi Arabic compared to a Levantine country.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So this is like my favorite story to tell anyone. The word is going to be rice. Every Levantine country would call it ruz. We call it timman. The reason for that is because Iraq was invaded by America. And whenever Americans would send like resources to the soldiers they're serving, it would be like a sack of rice and it would say 10 men. Like this sack would feed 10 men. So Iraqis saw that and they thought that's the word for rice in English. So it became timman.
That is so interesting. Wait, I've never heard you tell this story before.
Really? I feel like I would have, I don't know, to me it's the most interesting thing about like my country.
That is really interesting. So in a way, like they adopted English, but then they turned it into their own dialect.
Exactly, yeah. Iraqis do that with a lot of words. Like a lot of the slang is just English, but they say in their own accent.
That's so cool, but also like kind of sad because it stems from war, but still cool.
Yeah, I guess it's like something that they took and made their own out of that hard time.
Exactly. So you said that the Iraqi dialect of Arabic was your first language. When did you learn to speak English?
I learned to speak English at 8 years old when I immigrated to Canada. In school, they did teach us English, but obviously never at a level where you could become fluent. It was just basic words here and there. I don't have too much memory of that.
Okay. Do you have any memories of your life in Iraq before you came here?
So what actually happened is things got pretty bad politically in Iraq around 2003, 2004, and we had to leave. I think it was 2005 where we actually moved across the border to Syria. Things politically there were much more settled. So I only have memories in Iraq until maybe I was about like 4 or 5 years old. I never attended like actual school there. My only Arabic education came from Syria.
Okay. So So, I mean, I know this was a long time ago, but do you remember anything about things being different in Syria versus Iraq?
Yeah, to me, Syria seemed like they had much more freedom. It was very well built, like modernized, whereas sort of things then became the opposite way, where Syria started to struggle with the politics and Iraq became a little bit better. Right now, it's very safe to go back home. Everything is so modern, everything is so stable, especially in the capital of Baghdad.
Did things become unstable and then you came to Canada, or was there like a different reason?
We came to Canada with just the typical sort of immigrant dream of a better life, more opportunity for me and my sister. That's what my parents wanted. We left around that 2010 period, so the war hadn't started yet. We missed the war by basically a couple months where things started to get worse there.
Yeah, for sure. I can't imagine from such a young age moving from country to country, but when you came from Syria to Canada, what was that transition like? Do you remember like traveling and what it was like when you arrived here?
I don't like remember the trip just because I was so young and it was my first time like on an airplane and I don't know. I don't think I actually grasped the idea that I was just leaving everything behind and not going back ever. I never even knew Canada existed. We arrived in September, so I wasn't shocked with the cold yet, but things escalated very quickly. I remember like my first day of school, everything was so much more different from like how my school in Syria was. And I didn't know like a single word of English. I didn't even know how to spell my own name. But luckily there was this other Iraqi girl in my class and she helped translate for me. So that's sort of the only memory I have of that first day.
What were like some differences between Canadian school and Syrian school?
I guess the main difference was in Syria we had to wear uniforms. Here I went to public school. We did not. I feel like Syrian school is very strict. There's like punishment with like a ruler on your hand if you don't know the answer. Rules on like if you can wear nail polish, things like that. Your shoes have to be a specific way. Your hair is always groomed. Oh, I think the one thing that blew my mind was in Syria, it would be like a little courtyard and they would lock the door every morning and you cannot leave the school premises until school was done. Here, I came and it was like my first time going out to recess and I could see my house from the schoolyard. And I was like, oh, I can just leave. There's no door, there's no gate. So I feel like that was the biggest difference for me.
I think just recently our elementary school put up a fence, but throughout my whole life when I attended there, it was just out in the open.
Exactly, and you could just see the street and people walking by, and that blew my mind.
Now, I know like one really big misconception about life in the Middle East versus here is people always think that it's really unsafe over there. But from what you're describing, it sounds like safety was a much bigger precaution. Would you agree?
I do agree with that. Yeah. I've never seen my country as being unsafe. It just depends where you are and what the situation is like at that time, I guess.
Yeah. The reason I bring that up is because I know the media here has portrayed a very negative stereotype of what the Middle East is like. We'll get into that a bit later. When you came to Toronto, what area of Toronto did you settle in?
So I have actually always lived in that North York area, but my first day like ever in Canada, we were in downtown just for a while, maybe like a week or two in a hotel because we immigrated through the UN. So we had a bunch of like social workers helping us get health cards or bank cards ready, things like that, helped us look for an apartment. And we've always just lived in that North York area.
Would you say that you were a minority in North York?
Actually, no. We ended up choosing this neighborhood just because it was so multicultural and there were a lot of Arabs, so it would be easy for us to find community. In other places I've gone, yeah, I do feel like a minority.
What other places are we talking about?
I guess I started noticing it when I started like my post-secondary education, especially going to a university that has a lot of international students, sometimes even just from like Europe or America, a lot of white people, and I find myself, I'm the only person of color in the class.
What was it like for you as an adult to know who you are, know your background, and then have to sort of be thrown into that situation where you were the only one who maybe looked like yourself or spoke the language or had the background that you had?
I feel like I sort of am lucky to have experienced it this way just because I'm much more knowledgeable now. I don't feel insecure about being the minority. I'm very comfortable with my identity. I'm proud of it, and I would never try to fit in. So it doesn't bother me when I'm the only person of minority in the classroom, to be honest. Sometimes it is difficult, like when they make you do a survey or something and they're just like picking a box for you to fit into, and you just have to select one. And I know I'd be the only person selecting that box in the entire room.
That sounds like, yeah, a really different experience from a lot of people that we've had on the show. Being in post-secondary, then you would be surrounded by other adults. Did you feel like these people who weren't from the same background as you or didn't grow up in the same communities as you were mindful of what it's like to be a minority, or did they not really seem educated in that department?
I feel like it really depends who you speak to. I don't like to generalize everyone. Sometimes, if you're in a certain program at school, people sort of are forced to know these things just because they learn about them. But yeah, I have met a lot of people who, I'm going to use the word ignorance, they just chose to never learn. The Middle East is just what they see on TV, like war and just deserts. The only time they've heard about Iraq is because maybe their grandfather served there in the military or something like that.
Did you find yourself having conversations with people, noticing that they weren't educated?
Yeah, it's definitely come up sometimes when they're like, oh, you're from there? Oh, same thing for all the Middle Eastern countries. They think it's one single country. They mix up like Iraq and Iran, even though we speak two different languages, things like that.
You brought up media, and I do want to jump back to that because you were mentioning earlier that as a child you were growing up and you have these really positive memories of Syria and even like your life in Iraq. When you came here, do you remember at what point you started noticing that the general idea of the Middle East here is totally different?
I feel like I never paid much attention growing up until I reached like this adult stage where certain things were happening, especially in Palestine. I feel like now recently is when people have been actually paying attention to the Middle East as a whole. Before, our news would not even reach all the way here. It would always be censored and we'd be the last people they cared to know about.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like my main source of news was my dad because he would actually watch like Arabic news channels, like Al Jazeera is one, where they'd be reporting like live from Iraq and they would tell you the story how it is because they're Arabs too. And that news I take more to heart because it comes from the source.
Yeah, I remember for us growing up, sometimes we would have subjects in school, like for example, for history, or we would have this propaganda taught to us in books or through novels where we were told like it's really unsafe over there and you shouldn't travel there. The people there are very barbaric, this and that. So those were like stereotypes that I remember seeing and hearing growing up. But then I also knew that that can't entirely be true because I had Arab friends like you who traveled to Iraq at one point, right? What year was that around?
Last time I went was 2019, but I also went in 2016. Yeah, completely safe.
Yeah, exactly. So there was like this really weird dichotomy going on where I was learning one thing, but I was seeing something completely different. And for me, like I'm an outsider who was kind of observing this. I can't imagine for you who was from there being told this in school or hearing about this image that's being portrayed of your country, what that must have felt like.
Exactly, yeah. I don't think anyone would understand unless they're from there, they have their family there. I went there and I considered it a vacation. I went to have fun. It was safe for me. I never thought twice about my safety there. And there are a lot of, to be honest, like those travel like bloggers and stuff that do go and explore Iraq. So much history there. If you search up any of those videos, all they talk about is how generous the people are, how safe they felt. So again, it's just the media and that stereotype that has followed us since like the early like 2000s.
Definitely. You mentioned here in North York, there was like a big Arab population here. You weren't really a minority. Did you notice Iraqi specifically representation growing up in school or in your community?
In school, not so much. Like I definitely had one or two Iraqi friends. I wouldn't say necessarily events, but during high school, my dad did used to start taking us to events that were held like by this Iraqi organization, and they would sometimes hold the events in like Mississauga, and people from all over like Toronto and the GTA would end up going.
Oh, wow. That seems like a really good initiative. Do you remember what it was called?
I think they're called the Mesopotamia group.
Okay, okay. What would happen there? Do you remember?
Usually their most popular events were held during Ramadan. So we would go, they would have like an iftar, and then they would stay the entire time from iftar all the way to like suhoor time.
So, for anyone listening who may not be familiar with these terms, Ramadan is a month that is celebrated by Muslims around the world. And during this month, Muslims fast from a little bit before sunrise all the way to sunset every single day. During this time, the meal which you eat when you break your fast at sunset is called iftar, and the meal which you have in the morning before you begin your fast is called suhoor. People from around the world use different terms for iftar and suhoor, but these are the words that are used in the Iraqi Arabic dialect. They are, however, not limited to the Iraqi Arabic dialect. Many accept these as the universal terms for the meals that you eat during Ramadan.
And they would just be like playing games and like traditional Iraqi music, and they'd be like singers, things like that.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
It was. I haven't been to an event in a while though.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that there is such a big community here and you guys are able to feel like you're not a minority because there are like a lot of cultures. Even though Toronto is so diverse, they still feel like growing up they didn't have a community. So you mentioned that you traveled to Iraq recently, in 2019 and also 2016. I was wondering if someone from Toronto traveled to Iraq, what would be a really different, maybe culture shock or something that would just stand out as very different from Toronto culture or Toronto life?
The biggest shock to someone that maybe lives here is the way they drive. There's no actual proper lanes, the traffic lights don't work, or they work and they ignore them. So everyone is just driving wherever they want, and you just have to figure it out. And women drive there and they fight and they have road rage, and it's crazy. So every time we go back, my dad is so used to driving here with all the rules and the traffic signals. So he's like, never. I'm gonna sit in the passenger seat, and he makes my cousins drive him around. There's no like stop all the way, any of this. No, you just drive wherever you want. You can have 6 people sitting in the back seat, no traffic fines, no anything like that.
When I went to Pakistan, I went in 2016, and for me, one of the biggest culture shocks was seatbelts. They don't have seatbelts in their cars, and if they do, they pull them out.
That's so funny. I've noticed that too. It's like cut off.
Exactly. I was like, if there's one place I need a seatbelt, it's here.
I'm like not a type to get car sick, but when I'm driving there, I get car sick.
What about like the roads there? Did they have a lot of holes in them? Because that was one thing I noticed in Pakistan too.
It honestly depends on the area you're in. Some neighborhoods are much more well off, and then some roads, yeah, pothole after pothole.
Yeah, makes sense. I love that it's like something that we can unite on as kids from Toronto who've gone back home.
Yeah, it's actually funny. My stepmom used to live there and she used to drive there. And my dad is always so mind blown by that. And he's like, how could you pull this off? Like, how did you have the patience? So, yeah, could never be me. I'm a very anxious driver.
Even the driving test rules there are very different. From what I heard, we didn't have a driving test in Pakistan. You just pay for your license and start driving.
You could probably even like get a fake one. You could start driving at 12 if you wanted to.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's so funny because you think about it and like over here, you could never let that happen. It's unimaginable. But over there, it's a norm for people.
I mean, yeah, they're doing well. Like, I never really saw many accidents or anything like that. So I think they have bigger things to worry about than like the traffic rules.
Speaking of Iraq and Iraqi culture, is there any type of cultural clothing that comes from your country?
So the thing about Iraq is there are so many different groups. It's very diverse. So each group would have their own sort of dress. Kurdish people have their own sort of dress, lots of like gold and coins and things like that. What I can think of off the top of my head is men would wear something called the dijdasha, which is like, imagine Saudi Arabian men who wear the long like white thobe with the piece on their head, which is called the agal. Yeah. So it's basically just an Iraqi version of a kufiya, a Palestinian kufiya, just different pattern.
Oh, okay.
They wear it on their head primarily. And then women, it would be something like a galabiya, which is similar to sort of those Moroccan dresses, just a little bit more flowy, lots of like gold embroidery. things like that.
It sounds very royal.
It is. You don't see it too often anymore these days, but it's for a wedding or like an engagement party, a henna party, they would wear those types of dresses.
So what about streetwear?
Most of their clothes are imported from Turkey. I would say it's modest, and then they just follow sort of the trends that are in the neighboring countries. But it's definitely way more different than here. Because I remember when I was there in 2016, I wore one pair of ripped jeans, and my aunts lost their mind.
From what I hear, that happens here too, with like any older generation people.
Yeah, they're like, does your dad not have money to buy you clothes?
Exactly. Do you feel like when you went there and you went to like the markets and stuff, people could tell that you were not from there?
It depends on if I were to speak or not, because I am fluent in Arabic, but I guess sometimes, I struggle to find like a certain word and I'd have to say in English, and that's like a dead giveaway.
Yeah, the reason I asked that is because I don't know what it was in Pakistan when I went. Whenever they see or they even like find out or they suspect that you're not from there, prices triple or go up even higher. So we're like, okay, we're gonna like completely blend in, wear exact clothes that they wear over there. We're not gonna speak because you can tell from our accents. I don't know what it was, if it was the way I was walking or the way I was standing, but they knew that we were not from there.
That's the thing. They have like an eye for foreigners. We were like very conscious to always go out with a lot of my cousins. So that's how I would blend in. And I would usually just stay quiet so I don't fumble with the English. And then obviously like my cousins know how to go back and forth about the prices and things like that. So we would never get scammed by a taxi or trying to buy clothes.
That is such a good plan. If I ever go again, I'm definitely borrowing that strategy.
Because even my dad grew up there, some things he still didn't know, and a lot of things changed. And he's like, oh, I thought this was the way, and now we're lost. And I was like, well, how do we get back home?
Did you feel like there was a big change from 2016 to 2019?
Yeah, definitely. They just started, I feel like, adopting a lot of the things that the West was doing. So new food was coming in. They were coming up with all these trendy ideas, and like they started opening these huge shopping malls. And then even afterwards, my sister ended up going back, but I stayed here. And she told me like in this last 3 years, if you were to go back now, it would blow your mind how like one street looks so much different now.
Okay, this is so crazy to me because this actually isn't the first time we've talked about this on the podcast. I've had guests come in the past who've said the exact same thing, and I feel like it's true about Pakistan too, where there's almost like this rejection of their own culture going on. And the thing that's crazy to me about it is that our cultures are so beautiful. They're unique, they have such a rich heritage, but I don't know what it is that's just making so many people that are living there now or growing up there now reject their own culture and embrace a part of the world that they're not even from and they've never visited before.
I could agree with that actually, yeah. I feel like I have also heard that. They obviously still practice their traditions and stuff, but I think like the social media has a big influence on them. They see everything on TikTok and it's like, oh, like look at this trendy food. Like I'm pretty sure the Dubai chocolate trend blew up there and they had a blast with that.
Have you tried the Dubai chocolate?
Yes, I did. I also learned how to make it. So I was dedicated.
Oh, no way. Is it worth the hype?
To me, yeah, to be honest. I'm not a chocolate person in general, but like it was good.
I haven't tried it yet, but I've been seeing it everywhere. And I don't know if I'm just used to seeing food look extremely gorgeous and overly beautiful because that's how it's presented on TikTok. But for some reason, when I look at the chocolate, it almost looks too simple to be that good. That's why I guess I just haven't really gotten around to trying to try it.
You have to be a big fan of pistachio, I feel like.
Also, I feel like pistachio flavor here, like a lot of stuff that is supposedly pistachio flavor, doesn't actually taste like pistachio.
I agree with that, especially like ice cream
Yeah. Oh my
is a
God.
rip-off. You'll have to get the pistachio butter from an Arabic store.
So the Dubai chocolate does taste like real pistachio then?
Yes, it does, because they import that butter from like somewhere back home,
Oh, okay.
from the Middle East.
So then I might actually have to try this. I don't mind the flavor of pistachio, but I like real pistachio flavor.
I don't know, I've had ice cream that's pistachio flavor and it tastes like medicine. I can't do it.
Yeah, I don't know like what they add, but it's not real. It's definitely not real. What's something that's really popular there that's authentic Iraqi food?
Their national dish is called mazgoof, which is grilled fish. Some other ones off the top of my head would just be kebab. It would be dolma, which is similar to Turkish people, like the grape leaf stuffed with rice and vegetables.
Sounds delicious.
And then besides that, it's just a lot of rice, a lot of stews, things like that.
So, like grilled fish, what sets mesgoof apart from other grilled fish?
They use a certain breed of fish. I'm forgetting the name off the top of my head. And they butterfly it open and then they grill it on charcoal face down. And then sometimes they make this red sauce that has like tomatoes and onions and like put it right on top. When I am here, I never eat fish. I think here the fish tastes awful, but somehow every time I go back home, I like it there. It's just the way that they raise the animals, what they feed them. Obviously, the fish in that region is different. It tastes so much better there.
Oh wow. Have you not been able to find mesgoof over here in Toronto?
There is, but it just doesn't taste like back home. Obviously, it's not the same fish. There's actually a restaurant called Royal Misgoof who specialize in just like actually making the fish.
Okay. Have you in general been able to find any more authentic or close to like real Iraqi food over here?
Yeah, a lot actually. I feel like Mississauga is always a really good place to go. There's a place, maybe I think it's around Dixie. They're called Ishtar Catering, and it's just like this sweet Iraqi lady that like sits from the morning to night and she cooks the food. Like you cannot get more authentic than that. And there's always Sumac. They have it like on Lawrence. They have a lot of locations. Like they have one in Ridgeway Plaza. There's also Al Furat. That's Iraqi. So many have come up now in these past couple of years.
Wow, I love that. So the community here has really grown.
Definitely so much bigger than when I was younger.
What's the Iraqi entertainment industry like?
So I was actually asking my dad about this today because in terms of film, I really can't remember a time where I've watched a good Iraqi movie. I would not say they're like big on cinema in general. If they do act, it's bad acting. They do like a lot of comedy, so they're good at that. They have like talk shows, things like that. But most of the time, if you go to like an Iraqi household, they're watching Egyptian shows, Turkish shows, never like their own kind. But their music industry is very big. I feel like if you ask a lot of Arabs, they would tell you Iraqi music is the best.
Okay, what kind of music comes from Iraq?
It's very lively, very upbeat, dancey. I feel like we're most known for the wedding songs that come out of Iraq. So you'll see a lot of people who are not Iraqi play Iraqi music at their wedding just because of all the drums and the instruments in the background. The biggest sort of wedding music maker would be like Hussam al-Rassam, Hatim al-Iraqi, those sort of singers that have been in the industry for a good 20 years. I feel like in recent years they've tapped into that romance sort of like pop feel. So now like I would say the trendiest one would be like Saif Nabil. And then if you want like classics, it would be like that poetry sort of like the Adele Iraqi version would be Majid al-Muhandis.
Yeah, it's so interesting that Turkish shows, I mean, it makes sense that they're big in Iraq because you guys are closer, but like in Pakistan, and I think like even over here, they've kind of taken over television, I feel like.
To be fair, they make good shows. I feel like in terms of like that soap opera genre, they've really mastered it and they always come up with the craziest ideas.
Yeah, definitely. There was like this one, I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Ertugrul. That was like
Yeah, my father watches that.
my parents watched it. I didn't watch it myself, but they've been telling me since like it came out to watch it because apparently it's really, really good.
That's the thing about them is that they have a lot of history. So they always take the Roman Empire arc and like run with it and focus on a different aspect. And they never run out of ideas. And then the history is also accurate. So you're learning something at the same time.
It's educational content at that point. It's not even like a waste of time.
Yeah, good for them.
You mentioned also Egyptian shows are big. I haven't heard much about them.
To any Middle Eastern person, Egyptians are number one in entertainment in terms of TV. I'm pretty sure the first ever acting came out of Egypt. They're always making the best films, the best shows, especially like during Ramadan. That's where all the big shows come out. And it's always an Egyptian TV show that wins all the awards. They always have the best actors.
Oh, is there like a general Middle East award ceremony or something?
They do have, yeah, like their own version of the Oscars and everything.
Do you know any famous Egyptian or even like Iraqi or Middle Eastern actors who are very famous in Iraq?
I would say a big one is Muhammad Ramadan. He is sort of demolishing the industry in terms of music and acting. So every Ramadan he has his own big show he's starring in. And then he's also the guy who sings that song. I'm pretty sure you've heard it on TikTok. Where he's like bum 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 bum. Do you know that
Yes.
song?
Oh my God. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, him. He started as an actor first before becoming a singer.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he's one of the biggest actors in Egypt right now.
So you said that a lot of shows come out around Ramadan. Are they like religious shows?
No, actually, they're just like romance shows, comedy, any genre. But they just know that during Ramadan, that's when like the family gets together the most, and people like to sit together and watch TV, and like the channels sort of have a whole like Ramadan theme for ads and all of that. So it's like a thing we've been looking forward to every single year.
That's so nice. It's so different from Pakistan because for us, when Ramadan comes around, they transform everything into like being super religious. And even if it's like, say, like a really long soap opera or something, they'll change the characters and the storyline to just be focused on Ramadan. And then as soon as Ramadan ends, they go back to doing whatever they're doing. There is a new trend, however, of rom-coms being released during Ramadan. They're just supposed to be lighthearted shows that play for the month of Ramadan. So they're usually like 29 or 30 episodes.
That's crazy. I've never heard that before.
It's crazy to me to hear that a country so close to us is treating Ramadan as a time to show everything.
No, they do that every year, and every show they release is always exactly 30 days. So you start it on the first day of Ramadan, and the last episode always comes out on the last day. So that like Eid
Wow.
starts, and then you go back to your regular shows,
No, that works out perfectly too.
and if there's ever a second season, you'll see it next Ramadan.
Oh. So what's going on for the rest of the year? Wait a minute.
It's just like the other regular shows that they show, but there's like even talk shows and things like that that only happen during that month.
Interesting. I'm trying to think of a parallel in Toronto. Well, I guess the holidays and like holiday movies, but I don't feel like the way you're describing of like every single genre kind of coming together and releasing content. I don't know if we have something like that here.
Yeah, to be honest, I can't think anything besides like the Christmas movies.
And even those are not good. Like they're known for being bad.
Cannot sit through a full one.
It's always the same story. The girl or the guy goes back to their hometown and
And
then
then fall in love. Yeah.
yep, and they leave the big city to settle there forever.
Yeah, and like a little farm or something.
Were you able to find the names of any other actors?
Oh yeah, the most famous one I would argue is Adil Imam. He has done everything in the book because he started acting since cinema was invented in Egypt, and now I'm pretty sure he's late 70s, maybe even almost 80. So he has seen all the genres and he's been in all of them.
Oh wow, so like a
Yeah.
pioneer of the industry.
Exactly. He's a classic. Like if you ask anyone who's your favorite, they would say it's him.
Okay.
Oh, there's Yusra. She's a big classic. Or like Nelly Karim. Those are Egyptian.
What about Iraqi?
Most Iraqi artists are men.
I know
There
this.
are Iraqi actresses nowadays, but they're just not like household names yet.
Okay. So the Egyptian names are the Iraqi household names.
Exactly. That's what I would argue.
If you look at even Canada, the American names are the household names here too.
That's true, actually.
It's a shared experience for sure.
Yeah, I feel like that's how it is in the Middle East. Entertainment is not like closed off. If you ask someone like from Syria, oh, what's your favorite genre of music? They're gonna say Arabic, but they'll tell you like an Iraqi singer or things like that. It travels like all throughout the borders.
And one great thing, I guess, is that everyone speaks the same language, so you can actually understand. I mean, to a certain extent. I know the dialects can cause a bit of confusion, but you can, like, generally understand the language, right?
Yeah, exactly, you can. So I feel like that's what makes it so accessible.
Yeah, but with social media, like we were saying earlier, it's definitely changing where things are now crossing even further borders that they had never crossed before. I'm really excited to see Egyptian content start to become more popular here.
They deserve it. They're, I would argue, at par with the Turkish people in terms of the ideas they come up with. 90% of the time, my parents are watching Egyptian TV.
Egyptian Arabic dialect is also, I think, known for being difficult to understand in other Arab countries, right?
Yes, but if you ask a Middle Eastern person in general, I think they would say it's easier to understand than Iraqi dialects.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Hand the Mic Over. Stay tuned for part 2 next week, where we dive deeper into the political history of Iraq and how the dark background of Canada is not coincidentally similar. As always, you can find our episodes on Spotify and YouTube, and follow us on Instagram at HandTheMicOver for pictures from today's episode. See you next week!